You just got your first real paycheck and half of it's already gone. Taxes, benefit deductions, and things you don't even recognize yet took this big chunk out of your first paycheck before you ever even saw it. And on top of that, you have student loans coming due soon and a benefits package you don't fully understand. Today I'm going to walk you through exactly what to do so you can stop guessing about your money and start moving in the right direction from day one. Welcome new and returning Money Buddies. I'm your host, Skylar Fleming. And yes, it is a whole lot easier to get your money right at age 22 or while you're still a young adult than it is at 35 or 45 or especially 50 and beyond. Not because life is simple or easy right now, but because you have a lot of time on your side and fewer financial obligations pulling at you from every single direction. And if you can get the basics locked in today, retirement gets so much easier to save for. Saving for a home that you may want to purchase gets even easier. And honestly, your financial life as a whole gets a whole lot easier. And that's what today is all about. And being able to help young adults get started when they're first trying to juggle what to do with their money is one of my favorite things. I love getting to sit down and talk about all the countless opportunities that you're going to have at your disposal when you get started early. So I'm excited to apply what I've been researching and learning about for years to help you get started today. So let's get into it. So today, a lot of my research is going to center around some different tips and specific things that you can do to get started. So I want to start off with some of the main things to do after graduating college. And this is an adulting checklist from the CFP Board's website. And they list 7 things. 1, start saving. 2, create a budget. 3, have an emergency fund. 4, protect your biggest asset, which is your income. 5, create a debt system. 6, manage your credit score. And 7, ask about employee benefits. And I learned an interesting stat the other day that most of the time, it only takes people about 15 years to save up enough money for retirement. So if you can get started early and start right as you graduate college, imagine the rest of your life after the next 10 to 15 years being able to do whatever you want to do with your money when you're also making more money later down the road. So if you can create a budget and get started with saving earlier, you're going to be so much better off because of the power of compound interest. And I have talked about compound interest at length on this podcast, so I'm not going to go into it specifically right now, but just know if you start saving earlier, you're going to be so much better off and you're going to thank yourself later for making it so easy on yourself. And the other thing you need to make sure you have is protecting your biggest asset, which is your income. You need to make sure you have disability and life insurance. You need to have disability insurance no matter what, because at the very least, you depend on your own income. But if there's anyone else depending on your income, you need to make sure to have life insurance as well. That means that you're protecting your biggest asset, which is your income. Especially when you're young, your income earning potential and the compound interest on that income is massive. So you need to make sure that if your income were to stop, there's a way you're still going to be able to bring in money to cover the essentials in life. And now the other ones include creating a debt system and managing your credit score. These go hand in hand. If you can create a system to manage your debt and making sure you're paying off your credit card balances in full, paying off the statement balance, then your credit score is going to do really well. And if you can manage your credit score to make sure you're staying on top of any loan and that you're not getting in too much debt, then this entire debt system is going to be very beneficial for you when it comes to actually needing to take out a loan or make a home purchase or any sort of future debt like a car, or maybe you need a 0% credit card for a time period. Well, if you have a system built around debt and you're making sure to pay it all off, meeting your monthly minimum payments and so forth, the system is going to benefit you a lot. And you're going to build a good relationship with debt that allows you to stay on top of it instead of a bad one where you're either just avoiding it by not taking out any debt or you're avoiding it by refusing to pay on it or actually pay attention to it. And then the other thing that the adulting checklist mentioned was your benefits. And as far as employee benefits go, I want to mention a recent episode, number 32, where I talked about how you're leaving free money at work every single day. It's a great podcast episode, and I'm not going to go too much into benefits because we have a lot of other things to cover today. So be sure to go check out episode 32 of the podcast. This next article that I'm going to cover around budgets and financial goals comes from citizensbank.com. And they say, quote, creating a budget is one of the most important things you can do to start yourself off on a strong financial footing. And now you might hear people say they're scared to create a budget or that the budget is a B word, right? And that it's a bad word. But starting early makes it so much easier, because if you can create a budget now, it's going to be so much easier when there's not all this complexity that you will have later in life. And trust me, it's a whole lot easier to manage a budget at 20 or even 25 when it's just you or you and a spouse versus you and a whole family and a home and all these other random expenses that you had no idea would be coming at you. So start your budget now. Start your budget early, because you can get off on a strong financial footing, and it's so much easier to adapt and adjust your budget later in life. The next quote from the article says, setting financial goals and splitting them into long-term and short-term categories helps you work towards them in an achievable way. And once you've split your goals into long-term and short-term, I'd highly recommend starting out on the long-term ones first, because if you can get some money going and get that powerful compound interest working in your favor for something like retirement, it's going to be a whole lot easier as your income increases to hit those short-term goals really quickly. You'll often hear people say, well, I'll start saving for retirement when I have a higher income in my 40s and 50s. No, you should use that higher income as a way to easily hit short-term goals later down the road, because you already have your retirement set, because you got that money invested early. And the key thing here is, like I'm saying, get your retirement secured early. Get to a point like Coast Financial Independence. That way, when you need a $50,000 or $100,000 down payment for a home, you can easily do that when you're making a whole lot more money, because it's harder to save for retirement when you don't have as much time on your side, because compound interest can't do as much magic as it can when you're young. So please, if you're just getting started, start working on those long-term goals now so that you can be invested for the long term. And trust me, you will thank yourself later once you can get those out of the way, because it becomes so much easier to save for those bigger short-term goals. And now next, I want to talk about your very first job. We're going to talk about benefits a little bit, pay, location, commuting, things like that. This first article that I have here comes from thecollegegrad.com. And this list contains 25 components of a job offer. And I'm not going to mention them all here. I'm going to distill it down to a couple of key ones that you want to make sure you're aware of with your first job and that you're actually looking into with your first real benefits package. And my top 9 include medical insurance, life insurance, disability insurance, vacation time, retirement plans, employee assistance programs, overtime, commuting benefits, and number 9 is mobile phone benefits. And like I mentioned earlier, go check out episode 32 for a much deeper dive specifically on employee benefits. But I want to list just some of them and go into them a little bit more here. Medical insurance, that's a big one, especially if you're single and you're going to be the only one on your plan, because it may be remarkably cheap if your workplace is covering most of the premium. So just make sure you're paying attention to that. And also know that the 9 benefits that I mentioned could be extremely beneficial for you. Things like commuting benefits are something that's often overlooked, or employee assistance programs like a free telehealth program or free counseling or anything like that. It can be super beneficial and you may not even know about it. So make sure you're taking advantage of any of these benefits, and make sure to review your benefit package and ask your HR how you can use the benefit and sign up for them. I know one of my jobs has had a discount portal where I would check from time to time to see if there's something in there I was already planning to purchase and if there could be some sort of extra discount I could get. So again, be sure to go check out episode 32 of the podcast for a deep dive on benefits. But next I want to talk about how to evaluate and compare job offers. We're going to talk about a couple different things here like salary, compensation, your commute, your work situation. And this article comes from makingwaves.org. So be sure to check out the link for all of these in the show notes. But the first thing it says to consider is your compensation, things like bonuses, commissions, salary increases, stock options. Because beyond your salary, you want to make sure you understand how the rest of the compensation actually works. Does your company offer a regular annual bonus? How does that pay out? My wife works for a place that pays it out annually, so you need to make sure that you stay past that point if you're going to change jobs. And is there some sort of a formal plan for a salary increase each year? Because knowing the stuff up front means that you can actually plan around it instead of being surprised. Even though it might be a good surprise, planning around it makes it so much easier to deal with because there's more to your paycheck than just that base number. So you need to make sure you understand the full picture before you sign anything around bonuses, commissions, increases, stock options, and so forth. And as you get further and further in your career, there's going to be more and more ways that you're getting paid besides just a regular salary or an hourly wage. The next thing to consider is, quote, your work-life balance, your work environment, your company culture, and your career advancement or growth. You need to know how the cultural fit is going to play out. You might walk in for your very first interview and just know that the company's a mess. And then you get a couple years into that first job and realize it never went away and you want to look for a new job. So if you get a hunch or a sense of what the work environment is like, ask other people as well. One of my favorite things to do is when you're being interviewed by someone else other than the manager for the position, ask them what they like about working there. You can get a pretty quick sense about whether they're just fibbing their way through an answer or they really do enjoy working there. And of course, you want to make sure that there's a true path for career advancement and growth. You don't want to just end up in one position and never be able to grow, because if the company's not growing, it might not be the right place for you. Because early in your career, there may be a lot of opportunity to grow and take on new responsibilities. So make sure that whatever job you're signing up for has that opportunity. And another thing you need to consider from the article is, quote, your location and commute. And I think very often we overlook the location and commute for our first job. And sure, if it's your first job, you might be able to move and live closer to the job, but that's something you need to consider. And consider, how long is the commute? Will you have to drive there every single day? How long is the drive? How long is the drive with commuting traffic? And honestly, if you're not used to driving to work because you've been used to living on a college campus where you could get around without a car, you're going to find that commuting with a car absolutely sucks. Sitting in the same traffic every single day for an extra 10 or 15 minutes than it should realistically take you is brutal, and it wears you down so fast. I would say it's a key contributor to burnout for most people, and they don't even realize it. So make sure you're actually looking at options of where you're going to work. How often can you work remote? Are you required to be in an office every single day? Is there some flexibility if you need to stay home? Are there other ways for you to get to work, like a bus, a light rail line, a train, an e-bike? There's all sorts of different ways that you should consider. And you want to make sure to consider these, because if you find yourself having to commute 45 minutes one way in the morning and then it takes you an hour to get home, that will wear you out and it will make you hate the career that you chose. So make sure you're considering all these different things when it comes to finding your first job, or really any job for that matter, whether it's your first out of college or not. And next, I want to talk about student loans, because these are a big deal when you're getting out of college. So what are some of the things that you need to consider when you're first starting to take on your student loans? This first article that we're going to talk about student loans comes from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and it's titled, When and How Do I Start Paying My Student Loans? And I found this article because this is a big question for people. They don't understand how you actually start paying on your student loans. The article says, quote, most federal student loans have a grace period of 6 months, but it may differ, so make sure you check on that. But this is a time after you graduate, you leave school, or you drop below half-time enrollment when you don't have to make any payments. So please, if you just graduated, don't panic, because you may have some time before you have to get this all figured out. The 6-month window is really to help you get a job, start making some money, and then you can start making payments on your student loans. But you do need a plan of what you're going to do when that grace period ends, because the last thing you want to do to start out your life as an adult is have a super damaged credit score and no way to repay your student loans. So make sure you're looking into your options, and the best case scenario, of course, is to find a job and start paying on these loans. And there may even be a job out there that will help you pay on your loans, so that's something to consider as well. And then you can work on figuring out a plan to pay them off early, or whatever else you may want to do, like refinance them. But just know you have some time after graduating before they begin becoming due. And now, you heard me mention it there real quick. Do you refinance your loans or do you keep them federal? And the first thing, of course, here is to consider the interest rate. Because if you can get a whole lot of a cheaper interest rate by refinancing to private, then it's probably going to be worth it. But you do need to consider some of the other benefits of a federal loan. There may be other benefits like public student loan forgiveness or income-based repayment plans. And maybe student loan forgiveness is something you're going to go directly for, and that's an employer you want to work for. And if that's the case, then you're going to want to keep your loans public with the federal government. But make sure you run the math on all these different options, because that's what I think is most important. When it comes to making a decision on the student loans, yes, of course, there's a mental side of it, but think about your job stability, think about your career, think about the timeline that you have to pay off these student loans. I think that's why the math around all of this can be a bigger decision and should be a pretty big factor when it comes to making student loan decisions. And yes, of course, carrying a bunch of debt and getting laid off from your job, that will be a headache. But that's not necessarily something you want to just plan for. Think about the likelihood of it. Does your job feel steady and consistent? Well, then that's something you need to factor in. And when it comes to student loans, emotions will talk you out of doing anything. Trust me with that one. The best place to start here is running the numbers. Look at your interest rate on your federal loan, and then look at what a private lender is willing to offer you. If the private rate is meaningfully lower and you don't have a very specific reason to stay federal, then that is a strong case to refinance. Because if it's not the other benefits of keeping a federal loan, then really it just all comes down to math. And my wife and I did exactly this with a large chunk of her student loans, and it's saved us thousands of dollars. And we only got there because we sat down and looked at the actual math first. So start there and then start thinking about the other benefits and then make the call. And if you need help figuring out the mathematical versus other benefits side of this student loan discussion, please let me know. I would love to sit down and have a chat and help you figure out your student loans. But that does it for today's research and some great data on what you need to do as a new grad. What do you need to do when it comes to workplace benefits, compensation, all sorts of different things with your first job, figuring out what to do with your money, and of course, student loans, one of the biggest things plaguing our generation. So I hope you enjoyed today's research. Next up, I have a great case study that you're not going to want to miss. So let's get into it. So today's case study is all about Cole. Cole is a 22-year-old and just landed his first job as a supply chain coordinator, and he graduated just 2 weeks before starting this job. His salary started out at $52,000 a year, which he thought was amazing considering the jobs that he worked during college. But then he saw his first paycheck and realized how much of it actually disappears before it even hits his first paycheck. And also, something worth noting here is that Cole has $28,000 in federal student loans. They're a mix of different loans, and he knows the payments are coming up eventually. He has no idea when, how much those are going to be, or what sort of options he even has. He's starting to get some things in the mail from a student loan servicer about a grace period, but he's kind of just ignoring those because he figures it'll work out. But then on top of that, his HR department handed him this book that felt like a foreign language of benefits and told him he had 30 days to make a decision about things like a health insurance plan, a 401k, which he wasn't even sure what it was, an HSA, which seemed like just a mismatch of letters, and a few other things he'd never heard of. He felt super overwhelmed by all this and just wanted someone to tell him what to do. And now he's also single. He's renting a one-bedroom apartment as a roommate, and his parents weren't particularly money savvy, so he was never really taught about this sort of stuff. They just told him, stay out of debt and save what you can and live below your means. That's about as far as their financial advice went. But he's motivated to figure some of this stuff out as he's getting started before things get more complicated. So like I mentioned, Cole just graduated college, which means he has 6 months until his loan grace period ends. Now during those first few weeks of his new job, there's a few key priorities that Cole should take care of, or each of you listening should take care of as well. First, Cole's going to log into StudentAid.gov for the first time and figure out what he actually owes. He confirms he owes $28,000 in direct loans, identifies which are subsidized, unsubsidized, and all the interest rates. And he confirmed that his grace period ends November 1st, and he put that on the calendar. Now, the second thing here is that Cole tackles his benefits enrollment within that 30-day window. He chooses the simple high-deductible health plan that his company covers the majority of the premium. He enrolls in the 401k with 4% of his salary being deferred to capture that full employer match. And he also signs up for the HSA with a small monthly contribution because he thinks that's a pretty cool account to get some tax advantages for medical expenses. And now, of course, quick plug for episode 32 that you can go check out of the podcast for more great information on workplace benefits. And now the third thing is that Cole realizes he needs to build a budget on what his actual take-home pay is, which comes out to about $3,100 a month after taxes and benefits. And he maps out rent, utilities, groceries, transportation, and he starts factoring in that minimum student loan payment that he saw on his account when he logged in. That way he can start planning for that now before November hits. That way he's used to what it's like to pay for his student loans. And now that budget is really going to be one of his first habits. And once all of this setup is done, he spends the next couple months building and solidifying these habits so that everything is running smoothly. He sets up auto pay on his federal student loans, and that earns him an interest rate reduction, which is fantastic. He enrolls in an income-based repayment plan after comparing it to the 10-year plan using the government's loan simulator tool, which of course will be linked in the show notes. And given his starting salary, the income-based repayment gave him a payment that was about $80 cheaper per month. And now he, of course, automated his 401k contribution through his payroll, so he never sees that money and he's never tempted to skip it. And his work even had a feature for an annual increase to his contribution. So he put that at 1%, which is an incredible accomplishment for someone just getting started. And yes, let's be honest here, the beginning of this is stressful. Cole wanted to check his accounts every single day or every few days to make sure the money is going where it needed to go. But after a few weeks or a few months, it started to settle down because he realized nothing was going wrong with these automatic transfers and his automatic student loan payments. And that's a point that you're going to get to once you start getting this automation built in. It's going to become exciting and easy, and then you're going to begin to feel more and more confident. So what are the results of all this? Well, by the time Cole hits the 12-month mark, his picture is noticeably different from when he started. He's made every single student loan payment on time, he's never missed a due date, and his loan balance is dropping. It's not huge progress, but it's real progress, and there's no panic wondering what in the world is happening with his student loans because he knows that they're under control. And he's also contributing money to his 401k, and his employer is contributing money to his 401k, which would have been money he would have left on the table if he would have just ignored his benefits. And most importantly, the key takeaway here is that Cole feels like he's in control and understands what's going on with his money. He's nowhere close to financial independence. He's not loaded on cash, super wealthy, or anything like that. Shoot, he's not even debt free, but he's confident, and that's priceless. He knows he's on the right track. And that's what I want to teach all of you about today. The confidence that comes with getting this figured out and getting on the right track, that is massive. Sure, you might not be able to afford purchasing whatever you want, but you also can't afford to not get your money under control. Because making these changes right now and figuring out how to get started while you're in your first job, right out of college, or when you're just getting started with money, it's life-changing. Because in 10, 20, or 40 plus years, you will be thanking yourself for putting in the hard work now. And I hope you enjoyed that case study that really I hoped helped paint a picture that you can get this under control. You can start with one thing at a time and really get the ball rolling in the right direction. And I hope you enjoyed today's episode. We're going to wrap it all up next and tease next week's episode, which is going to be an extremely fun one. So the one action item this week is for you to log into StudentAid.gov and figure out 3 things: how much money you owe, what type of student loans you have, and when your grace period ends. Write those 3 things down. That's it. You can't figure out a plan with your student loans until you actually know what you're dealing with, and most people never do that. So do that this week. And if you don't have student loans or you're already on top of dealing with them, then congratulations. You get this week off. I would just ask you to share this episode with someone who could benefit from figuring out their student loans and getting started with their money. And thank you for listening to today's episode. I really do appreciate each and every one of you. I can see the numbers growing, and that's super exciting and super motivating. And if you know anyone who just recently graduated college or is dealing with any of the things we talked about today, share this episode with them. Because next week, we have such a fun episode coming up because we're going to kick off summer and talk about how your financial plan can weather this season where there's so many different things going on. And every single weekend can feel so busy and so expensive. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss next week's episode about kicking off summer with your financial plan. And thank you for listening to this week's episode of Financial Planning for Young Adults. I'm your host, Skylar Fleming. Have a great week. And hey, quick heads up. This podcast, it's meant to be educational and it's for entertainment purposes. It's not personalized financial advice for your specific situation. So before you go out and make any big money moves, make sure you chat with a qualified financial professional who knows your full financial picture.